gentlemen, welcome to Shoot, Punch, Kick, the only podcast in the world where three local Brooklyn heroes talk about 80s and 90s flicks in their never-ending struggle to find the answers about our alien origins. Today, Anthony, Telly, and I are celebrating or possibly commiserating over the 30th anniversary of the release of the Kurt Russell and James Spader-led sci-fi actioner Stargate. How's it going, boys?
Great.
What a rush.
Already.
I got here via the Stargate, so it was a good commute. How's everybody doing?
What's up, fellas? What's up, Telly? How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Looking forward to jumping into this.
Great. All right, so let's, as we always do, start by listening to see what our new futuristic mechanical overlords over at ChatGPT have to say to describe Stargate. Stargate from 1994 is a science fiction action-adventure film directed by Roland Emmerich. The story begins when Dr. Daniel Jackson, an archaeologist, is recruited by the U.S. Air Force to decode ancient symbols on a mysterious artifact called the Stargate, discovered in Egypt in the 1920s. Jackson determines that the Stargate is a portal capable of transporting people across the galaxy. He joins Colonel Jack O'Neill and a team of soldiers on a mission through the Stargate, arriving on a desert planet resembling ancient Egypt. Here, they encounter an alien civilization enslaved by a godlike ruler, Ra, who is revealed to be an alien using advanced technology to maintain power and immortality. Jackson and O'Neill rally the planet's inhabitants to rebel against Ra, leading to a climactic battle for freedom. The film combines elements of science fiction, mythology, and action, establishing the universe that would later expand into the popular Stargate series franchise. So, how do we think ChatGPT did?
So, planets, inhabitants, that was it? That little village or town that they...
Yeah, everybody was there, I guess.
Everyone lived there? Okay, and that's a...
Yeah, they only needed... I mean, how many people do you need to mine some special mineral the old way, by the way?
I mean, it's a pyramid.
That's what they were doing.
Okay.
It's a pyramid. How hard could it be?
Okay.
But yeah, I had to double check that too, Telly. So yeah, the thing that they're doing there is they are mining the mineral that the Stargate is made out of, and basically that was the complete reason for enslaving the humans at all, was like a mining operation so they could build their ships.
Did they ever explain that explicitly in the movie?
So again, they do explain that they're mining there.
Okay.
He specifically says they're mining whatever material the Stargate is made of, because the guy goes over with his little tool to see what the metal was. And then, again, some of this for me, I'll have a hard time distinguishing between what was told in the movie and what was told subsequently in the shows. So, I mean, again, speaking of which, let's just get into it. Let's start with our personal histories with this movie. So, Telly, why don't you start us off?
So, Carlos, growing up with you and the guys, I know we were all obsessed with aliens and the possibility of aliens visiting our planet and UFOs and all that kind of stuff. So when this movie came out, it was like totally up our alley. For one reason or another, I just missed it in theaters, and I never really got to it until many, many years later. I saw this like maybe 10 years ago on DVD, and I was just kind of like getting kind of bored and just kind of half watched the rest of the movie. So, But this was my first time in 10 years watching the film from beginning to end and paying more close attention to it. But this was something at the time that I really wanted to see and just didn't have a chance to watch it.
What about you, Dash?
Always on the radar when I had first seen it. This was the first time watching me, but when I first knew of Stargate, I think the show was already around, and it was a big deal that it was like a Showtime show. On cable, and I knew that it was a movie, and every time I tried to look at the show, it just didn't grab me. I knew it was like space stuff, but especially coming around the same time as like a Star Trek Next Generation, it was really easy for me to compare Worf with the guy who does the voice for Kratos and God of War, and I just thought he looked so corny with the with the thing on his head. So I was like, all right, this is kind of whack. And then I knew it was supposed to be it's called Stargate, and I was like, they were just always in the a forest every time I turned to the channel. So I was just like, all right, this doesn't seem like it's for me. So then it kept coming out with new iterations, and I think I watched the first Atlantis maybe, and was surprised to see that one. Like they all just kept going on and becoming big hits. So
It was big,
I mean,
yeah.
clearly there was something there, but I never watched any of them until yesterday when I watched this one.
So for me, again, I think I mentioned this in a previous pod. I'm pretty sure that this is the first movie that I can recall going to see by myself. I was working, I think, delivering pizzas at Frankie's, I think, at the time. So I had a little bit of pocket cash, and I wanted to go see this movie. And I don't remember exactly why you guys didn't come. I'm not sure if it was because you were busy, or if maybe the trailer didn't really appeal to you guys. But I distinctly remember going to see this by myself, and when I went to see it, it completely blew my mind. And I remember after the movie was over being like, oh my god, I've got to tell somebody about this immediately. Like, who can I? And I ran to fucking Beta Carlos's house. I don't think he was I think he was probably at work. I think he was working at Wallbounds or something, or Pathmark at the time, and he was like on his way home. So unfortunately, his poor mother and sister had to sit there with my excited 14-year-old ass just exposition dumping the entire script. Oh my god! And there's these aliens, and it turns out the pyramids weren't made by humans, but they were made by aliens. And poor Margie's just looking at me like, okay,
Cool start,
can I make you an egg sandwich?
yeah.
So yeah, this movie at that time completely blew my mind, and then really shortly thereafter, Showtime released a TV show, and I was a big fan of the TV show, and that expanded into other TV shows. And it was at a time where there was a lot of really great sci-fi going on. Right, this is the Babylon 5, Deep Space Nine era, Farscape, right, and so at the time of like a golden age for sci-fi television, this franchise was held highly regarded amongst them, won a bunch of awards. So I was really into Stargate for a long time, and they really expanded the lore. Having said that, once the shows came on, there was really no reason for me to watch the movie too much. So although again I was completely versed in the lore, I haven't actually seen this in maybe 20 years.
Wow.
Okay, occasionally it's on and I might play it, but I'm more familiar with the characters as they're represented in the TV shows than necessarily this iteration of it. One thing I think is really notable and cool too is that not only were there TV shows, but the TV shows, the main characters in the TV shows were the same main characters from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike something like Highlander, where it was just like other stories in the same world, this is like the shows were a direct continuation of the movie. So kind of like what you were saying when we were talking about Terminator Dash, it's just almost like me watching the prequel to the shows.
Yeah.
After all this time, so so now that we got that over with, let's just kind of take some initial reactions. Again, let's not get too deep because we will cover specifics later on. But just initial thoughts, Telly.
Just kind of uneventful, very Roland Emmerich-y, especially after watching Universal Soldier and just whatever I remember from Independence Day. This feels like the lead up to Independence Day, where it's just like there's too much time spent on the human characters and not exploring the mythology a little bit more and what the aliens are doing and why they're doing it. Because nothing really happens until like 90 minutes into this like 2-hour plus movie in terms of action.
What would you say is the first thing that happened? When you say that, just expand.
It's like, I think like when there's some kind of assault on the village.
Okay.
When the ships are coming or something. Or I forget. But and also just being a big Kurt Russell fan and a big James Spader fan, I felt like they were both miscast. Kurt Russell is totally just anyone could have played this role in this movie. He was completely wasted in his role in this film.
Dash?
Yeah, for me, I was just completely underwhelmed. And I think because of the lineage of the franchise after that, like there's something about going into a Roland Emmerich movie where it's a standalone movie, right? Like even Universal Soldier with 5 sequels, if I told you they're like, oh, they're direct-to-video sequels, you probably go in with a lower expectation, saying this probably wasn't a huge hit. Probably, they weren't coming out theatrically, all 5 of them. This one for the spin-off seasons, the spin-off series have almost like 10 seasons each. I mean, clearly people really love it. Good, pretty good Rotten Tomato scores. We talked about the Letterboxd score. So I went in expecting either one, a pretty solid action movie, or a solid sci-fi movie, or a mix of the two. And when I watched it, I was like underwhelmed in both of those. To Telly's point, there was no like conflict for that long. That was like the first time where there was like a threat. So leading up to, when the there's like an assault on the village or the soldiers, I forgot which one came first. But up to that, it was just something happens and something else happens and then another thing happens. And I remember just like consistently and constantly checking the time, like where are we in the movie?
Ouch.
And I was just not blown away by it.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So different take for me. I think this movie mostly holds up for me. One thing that struck me initially is I totally get why my mind was so blown by this movie as a 14-year-old. So again, to Telly's point, this was a time where like very much in the pop culture was this whole like alien craze. I think this is around the time of the alien autopsy tapes, right? This is X-Files.
Mm-hmm.
There was TV shows like Sightings and stuff, right? So we
Sightings.
were all
Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah. So it was
Fire in the
very
Sky,
much in the
Carlos.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, we saw
Communion,
that.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this was very much kind of in the pop culture, and it was something that I was really interested in. And one thing I will say for the marketing of this, I had to go back and take a look at the trailer. The marketing did a really good job of not giving away the plot. If you look at it, it's just kind of slow panning shots of the Stargate itself, with like vague phrases like the key to our past and our future and what mysteries lie beyond in the Stargate. I think there was only like a couple of, maybe 2 or 3 second shots of the fighter jet things that the aliens had, and a couple of shots of like people wearing Egyptian clothing. So kind of going into this, I didn't have any idea what the plot was going to be about. And I don't remember if at the time I had been exposed to the pyramids were made by aliens.
I think that was a popular.
ideas.
That was one of like the things that I was fascinated by, because there was. I think that was on Sightings a lot. The theory of the ancient astronauts, which I know was like popular in the 70s and stuff. And I thought that was kind of, I was, being a teenager, you kind of buy into it, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
Total sense. Seems legit.
It checks out.
That seems like it's possible. Like that little squiggly line, that's an alien coming from space.
Yeah, clearly.
And the imagery the marketing of this film was brilliant, because like we've never seen that sort of imagery before in a movie with like spaceships and pyramids and ancient Egypt and all this kind of stuff. So that's what really hooked me into the film, because I'm like, oh, they're bringing that story to life, or that theory to life, which is not what they really do. But still, just from the trailers and everything, it looked like an expensive, flashy, really interesting movie.
It was interesting. I saw I was watching a review separately, or like a retrospective, and somebody was saying that they were like, this movie came out when I was like in my Egypt phase, and they were like, every kid, you learn about it in school, and it's like one of those like really big wonders. So I could totally and to your point, Carlos, of saying like I could see why X-year-old me would love it. It was just like, the wonder you learn about. That's like one of the first things you learn about in school.
Egypt,
that's like an actual world event. You're like, yo, this shit exists. And I think that like just that idea of the fact that it's somewhat, because there's so much mystery around it. And then saying like, yeah, aliens did that, and you get aliens a little bit of credibility to this kind of thing. I could totally see that being like something that's like, because ironically watching this, what you're talking about, and the Prometheus, it reminded me a lot of Prometheus, which is the astronaut theory, and it's the reason why I like Prometheus, and why I liked stuff like Battlestar. Like I love that idea of
that concept.
Yeah, so seeing it was cool to see another take on that theory.
Yeah, I mean, so imagine now. I mean, just talk about perfect target audience. Already kind of hyped up about the whole alien thing. Love sci-fi. Egypt culture is like really cool. And again, I'm not sure if I had already been exposed to that concept or not, but I think it was the first time because I just remember. I mean, again, it just makes sense how mind blown I was by it at the time. Now, and also to your point, Dash, about the kind of alien astronauts being a god. The later on, the show kind of expounds on the lore and just takes it to just not the Egyptian culture, but pretty much all god culture, God praising culture, ancient cultures are not actually gods or just beliefs that we had. They were aliens that from the same race that basically took over, which is a really cool concept in the end. Now, as an adult, it's definitely less mind blowing. It still strikes me as a competent sci-fi actioner in the Emmerich style, if you're into the Emmerich style. It's not exactly deep sci-fi storytelling or character study, but as a fun summer popcorn flick, and I think a good basis for the later shows, I think it works. Having said that, as an adult, politically speaking, I have some thoughts about Space Moses. But before we get into that, before we get into the nitty gritty and specifics, let's talk a little bit more generally about the movie. So what do you guys think about the conceit of the film? Like a device, an ancient device found here that can transport us instantly to anywhere else in the universe, and the idea that, again, our ancient beliefs in God worship was really just a result of aliens kind of manipulating us and subjugating us.
I think that's a brilliant jumping off point. So I'm with it. I'm with you. And Dash, I think there's another connection with Prometheus that I'll talk about later on, but it was like a scene Prometheus almost lifted directly from this movie. But yeah, I think the conceit of the film, it's a fun theory to build a movie around for sure.
Yeah, for me,
Dash?
it's not the ideas. Like if I read the box or you were telling me about it, I'd be like, "Fuck yeah, I'm in."
I'm in.
But when it was the
execution,
it was the execution. So you cannot build this device that takes you anywhere in the world, anywhere in the universe. And it looks just like the shit we left. Like, they're
it's like a shithole.
we're going all the way across.
And there's nothing there. That was another problem. And I know this is like pre CGI, but it's a desert with like a little shanty town in the middle of it and the pyramid at the other end. And it's like there's no civilization here.
And I think that the execution part of it, like, I think that it has really big ideas and they set up an expectation because, when they turn on the Stargate and, it looks like water, they can't see anything through it. There's all this mystery around it. And then when they go through, and I don't know, maybe this was kind of cool at the time, but, the animation when they fly through, I thought that was a little whack, But then, no, like I thought the water part, like the part that looks kind of like the abyss, I thought was dope.
Yeah.
But
the travel,
the 3DO screen that
we used to use.
Yeah, so
we gotta get that up somewhere too.
Yeah, and then they get out of the of the gate, and I was like, oh. And then they're like, oh, we have these inhabitants. And I'm like, oh, cool. And then they're like, just regular dudes in like rags.
Yeah, just a lot of people with braided hair. Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. And they had one. And I think just like the overall like expectation was so in the vein of like things that have come before it too. So it like with those ideas, it just also had a lot of like really iconic shots and stuff that felt very Spielbergy and Star Warsy. But like when you get to Tatooine and you got the double suns and the Jawas and the droids, like it's a full like meal of shit that they're throwing at you. Yeah, they're like, yo, here's one creature.
Here's a village.
Yeah. Even when they land, it's like when they materialize, they don't even materialize. They just like show them laying on the ground. You know what I mean? When you reach like go to point B, but yeah, I just thought at that point, it's just where things don't make any sense because you're going to travel through this portal that's going to take you God knows where. You don't even bring a scientist with you. right? That knows how to get back, or they don't even just send.
No, they
in, like,
did. They did bring a scientist. It's the black guy, and he's the one. He's the only guy who got killed. I just want to throw out there the only member of the squad
okay.
who
All right.
dies is the black guy.
I totally missed
and he's
that
the only
part.
black guy in the squad.
But don't
But
you
yeah, he's
send
the
in
scientist.
but like you test it out first. You don't send like a bunch of 20 guys and just blind. But so I thought that was weird. And it's kind of rushed, but it is what it is. You kind of go with it, but it's no surprise that they can't get back.
And
Well,
very rushed in the terms of like in just them getting the Stargate on too, right? Like we get
Very
one
convenient.
scene where clearly this dude's a kook, right? Nobody in his community respects him or his opinion. He comes in and he just sees like the
2 weeks
chalkboard
later.
and is like, no, he just sees the chalkboard and he's like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong.
Yeah.
We got ourselves a Stargate.
Right.
It was like
it's
just so
the security guard reading a newspaper, and it just happens to have
Takes it
like
from him.
some.
And then also the
Yeah.
idea that occurred to me too is like there's only so many combinations that could be used on that ring, right? Because there's only so many symbols. You've had 80 years at this point to fuck with this thing. How come we just haven't tried every combination and see what the fuck happens, right? Like and like how are they powering
That's like me
this
in
thing?
every Resident Evil game. I'm just like, all right, we're gonna figure this
one,
out.
1 1 1
Yeah.
1 1 1 1 2 1 1 1 1 3. But all right, so that's interesting though. You do kind of bring up a good point about the Marines themselves. We can jump around in some of the order of some of these questions, but so would you consider these squads Space Marines? And if they are Space Marines, are they the most incompetent squad of Space Marines ever?
They're first off, they're just straight up Marines. At no point are they really
They
in
travel
space.
through space.
Did they?
They travel. They're not on Earth. They're not Marines.
I don't know.
I seen a flash to white and them just on the floor.
but
It's
this
like
is
trust
where-
us.
Fair enough.
But this is where you need some kind of setup where they're like preparing, or they're just like walking through this portal. They don't know what's going to end up on the other side, and they bring like equipment. How do you radio back to back to Earth? They've got like radio equipment. Kurt Russell's brought a bomb with him. I just don't even understand like what they were planning to do, what their plan was.
Yeah, there was no and that's the thing. Just then, this will be the last thing I say about Prometheus because I don't want to compare them. The way that they set that up, there was this expedition, right? So it seemed like it made sense for an uncharted place, right? You had like your geologist, you had a couple of soldiers, you had, and it's the same thing even in Aliens, where they're going on like a rescue mission, and it made sense to have the things. There was nothing that says, "Hey, you're going." Who knows where? And like, all right,
I mean, I guess this is like something where you kind of compare this movie to our times now, where they're talking about sending people to another planet where they will never be able to come back, and you're like, what kind of people would sign up for that? Right? I thought that was something they could explore because, like with Kurt Russell's character, obviously his son is dead.
We know why.
The whole backstory also was unnecessary about Kurt Russell's character, but I guess that was his only characterization in the movie. But just like what kind of person like goes on essentially like a suicide mission, right? But they don't explore any of that at all. These people just thought they would go there, come back, and make it home in time for dinner.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I think he also kind of made promises that he didn't keep Spader. I mean, as far as his ability to get them back, I think it was meant to be like a one and done, quick hop in there, see what's around there, and hop right back. But here's another question that I posed on the effectiveness of this. So these, I think we've agreed upon incompetent Space Marines. Like, do we buy that they could rally a group of slaves to overthrow their oppressors and like complete a revolution in under 48 hours? They didn't really spend a whole lot of time and just overthrew thousands of years of set in place oppression. It's just a bunch of kids, right? I mean, I don't know if I had to take one thing away that or one of many things away that I totally don't buy. It's that. What's your take?
Nah, and they weren't embedded in the people at all. Like I can see like something like an Avatar, right? Like say what you will about it, he's like super embedded. He learns their ways, they communicate, they earn respect from it. Like the Kurt Russell's like, here's a lighter. Yeah, that's the best I can do, man.
and a candy bar.
Yeah,
smoke this.
And I guess being an adult, thinking about this movie, like you gotta convince these people that have been oppressed for generations that they're actually oppressed, right?
Mhm.
So, and
Yeah.
I think here they're just kind of doing like a shorthand of like Dune or any kind of sci-fi movie. But that's a problem
Spice
because
must
it's such
flow.
a unique idea what that you're springboarding from, and then you just go to this very cliche stuff about liberating these foreign people, getting marrying the foreign bride and all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, man. So, all right, let's ask about what about Ra? Do we think Ra is an effective baddie? I don't necessarily just mean the performance, but just like the idea of Ra, and then we can also talk about the performance. Like, is he menacing at all? Do we buy him as a threat? And also, what is the deal with him being surrounded by all these scantily clad children?
He's P Diddy.
Oh,
So
I didn't see
yeah,
any baby. They
no,
got futuristic baby all in the.
yeah, something like that. He's like it's like Epstein Island. But no, I didn't think Jay Davidson made for a very effective villain, and I just didn't understand.
Is that
Okay,
his
there's
fault
been.
or all the
I like
character?
the idea that this alien needed to like basically transmigrate his soul into someone to stay alive, but then it's like wouldn't the bad guy sort of build a world that's sort of like a reflection of
Around
who
that.
he is as opposed to basically
Nope.
assimilating into theirs. So that
Mhm.
just didn't make any much sense to me. um and yeah, the threat just wasn't there because also it just feels like once they get to the planet, they're just making shit up as they go along to come to reach an ending, because it's like, oh, Jay Davidson, oh, I'm gonna blow up the planet because I'm a bad guy.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I was just surprised
Dash.
by how little progress they made. So they're like, hey, this is like thousands of years he did all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you
Where's
get,
the
it's like,
7-Eleven?
what have you been doing for,
Yeah.
For the last
2,000
1,000
years? It's like they have like a
Not
half
even a
built.
subway station. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Well, I mean, also they think the purpose they mentioned purposely, like education, written language, all that was
Yeah.
forbidden for that reason.
But
And also, you find out again, this is not fair to give it credit in the movie because it's not explained in the movie. But again, I'm speaking just in the greater context of the lore. The planet that
I
they
am the
land.
law.
I am the lore.
The lore.
The planet that they land on is just a mining outpost. It's not like A or B. It was like Earth or this, and this is all
Mhm.
I have left. It's small, but intentionally small because it's just some random mining outpost that Ra has
Mhm.
in the middle of, and the only reason he even goes to it is because he recognized that the Stargate was activated. Again, not fair to credit that with this movie because
Mhm.
it isn't explained in this movie. But again, watching this almost as a prequel, you kind of get some of these cooler little
Yeah.
tidbits.
Well, I'd
All right.
say like just in terms of like what they were doing there, and I think this is where I would hope. So, and again, when we talk about the runtime of it and the amount of time that is not actiony, there's like really two scenes in the
If
movie,
that.
so, and there's like no characterization. So, like, what is that time being spent on? And I thought that the implications and the questions that the movie kind of is in the backdrop of like, what does it mean? Like, I didn't get anything of like how this alien created the things that we understand to be Egyptian, right? Like the importance of the eye, the horse heads, and things like that. So
Mm,
when it
that's
became
fair.
like I gave you, because this was something I think this was said in the movie. It was like I
Oh.
gave you the civilization. I like he was the like
I
the
created your civilization. I'll
yeah,
destroy it.
but
Oh.
it
Okay.
didn't have the the kind of reasoning behind it to give it the something for you to like sink your teeth in to
To latch
where
into.
yeah, because other than aliens really built the pyramids, there was no like, oh, and this is probably stuff that's explored in 30 seasons of the show, which I can see it giving a lot of
Mhm.
room to explore these themes. In the movie, it didn't do it. So when you have a lot of those movies that kind of are prequels to our time, like where someone like creates something or leaves a relic, and a big part of the responsibility of doing that is to say, this is what it did on my planet. This is why I did this.
Mhm.
This honors this person. And you can still leave like mysteries, but I thought they were just like, you recognize this from Egypt, like that's
Okay. See,
that was
that went
kind of
over
it.
my head. I wasn't sure because he in the beginning of the movie, in the prologue, where the spaceship arrives in this primitive culture, and I thought that was all already like an Egyptian type of culture, or I
No.
don't
It looks
know.
like
That's like a
nomads. It looks like
prehistoric.
he
Okay,
brought
I don't know. So
he brought
whatever.
the Egyptian, and then it's funny again later on. I don't want to keep going back to the show, but you later find out that like the other parts of this race also represent other gods and god worship throughout. So there's like a Norse.
Mhm.
One of his other, and then there's one that's a Chinese god, and it's straight up it's straight up Fu Manchu. It's straight up
Mhm.
Lo Pang from Big Trouble in Little China, right? He's got the mustache, the whole 9 yards. But yeah, they brought the culture to us,
Oh,
and we
okay.
were just I guess cavemen.
Yeah, well,
All right, but
to
let's
Dash's point, like, yeah, what was the outcome of that? Because there was no culture, there's nothing on that planet, and the people were living in like squalor. So,
mhm.
yeah, it's just a lot of
Well,
questions. Where I guess if you're young enough to watch this movie, you're not asking
you're
those
not even
questions.
thinking about that.
Yeah.
You're not even giving it a fucking second thought. All right, so just finally on the movie like writ large, and I think I may already know the answer to this based on kind of what we've said, but I think that it was Dash. Tonally, this movie kind of fluctuates between sci-fi and like action. Do we
No, no.
think?
Not an
I would
action
say
movie.
that's what it says on the box it's supposed to do. What the
What,
what
what,
the movie does is just like it's just a series of scenes that get you to the next scene. In my opinion. And sorry to cut you off because I know you could have set something up, but just in in the terms of like watching it I was like, oh, okay, like they're not doing anything, so we're gonna get some like of those ideas or people talking, but it's like it was just they were using that time to play with like the familiar tropes of, oh, he has fire, he must be a god.
Mhm.
Oh, he doesn't know how to ride the bantha. Like all of these moments in lieu of the sci-fi stuff to kind of create the world, give motivation to
Mhm.
literally anybody.
So the question I was going to ask is, does it actually focus on either sci-fi or or action? But and I think again to the point, I knew the answer was going to be like not really. But do we think it would have been more effective if it tried to more kind of go in the direction of hardcore sci-fi, or maybe even oppositely forgo some more of the sci-fi elements of aliens and just kind of go further in the action direction? Would that have been more effective?
I think like Prometheus, I guess, captured that, right. I love it or hate it. That movie has like got a very mixed response, but it kind of leaned into the sci-fi and the action spectacle of things, even though there wasn't much of a story there. Um, and the
Oh, there was
other
plenty
thing
of
that
story in Prometheus. All right, that's topic for
well, I
another
don't remember. I haven't seen it in a long
conversation.
time. I haven't seen it in a long ass time. But one scene though reminding me of Prometheus and Stargate was when James Spader sees that creature, and he just like goes up to it like in Prometheus when they see that snake thing, and just like
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
without like, okay, this is an alien creature I've never seen
It could
before,
bite
I'm just
me.
gonna
Does it
put
have
my hand
fangs?
out and say hello.
Mhm.
I was like, oh Jesus Christ.
Maybe it
And that
likes
was
candy
that.
bars.
But when you talk about tone, that's like my problem with it. Some parts of this movie felt like I was watching the Never-Ending Story, where it just felt like a children's movie. Hey guys, we're gonna go after the bad guy and let's rally up the troops. And then
Yeah,
that
I think
scene
it
with Kurt
was though.
Russell when he's talking to the children, and it's
Hmm.
kind of slapsticky, and it just felt again the same things we were saying about Universal Soldier and Roland Emmerich, where the tone is kind of like all over the place just to kind of keep the audience entertained, but it's not really serving the story.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
I agree.
I think I would love to have seen, because I would just abandon the idea that this would be a hardcore sci-fi movie, and I think they could have went in with a really cool, like, we don't know fully where we are, but you could have like cool war scenes. The thing that I'll say with like and especially with Roland Emmerich later on with Independence Day, at least the first one, we don't know what the aliens really want other than to just kill people, but there's enough like interesting human characters to drive the story forward, and then get your plot points of they're losing everything, they're rising up, they're on equal footing, they win kind of situation. With this one, the whole like rebellion part, they kind of just up until an hour into the movie, we don't know what the threat is. We're just getting on the planet. We're meeting some of the
Locals.
native inhabitants and stuff like that. And then when it happens, they're like, oh, okay, here's how we get back, how we stop them. There's a bomb. Here's the threat. This is what all of this stuff is kind of jammed into 50 minutes, which was really tough. And I think that it was, that action part was at the expense of that build up earlier, where if you just say, hey, you know what, we're not really even doing that anyway. Let's use that time to kind of really make this war kind of thing happen. I would say like something like, Return of the Jedi almost had more with the Ewoks, right? Like they can't, because there's a lot of parallels of them not really even being able to communicate with the people on the planet. So, there's certain stuff where, for the amount of time that they spend, they're not even talking to each other, so you're not even getting this like, oh, there's a big camaraderie happening. There's, a good relationship forming with these people other than purely on like a really surface level.
Yeah, within 24 hours and all that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of dig. Speaking of the characters and the characterization, let's dig a little bit deeper into some of the performances. So first, we've got James Spader as Dr. Jackson, or again, as I like to call him, Space Moses. Everyone knows my affinity for Kurt Russell, so normally I'd start with him, but I'd argue that Jackson is actually the main character here.
Yes.
I think that given with what he has, I believe he did fairly well with the role. He plays this frenetic intellect thing pretty well. Just kind of watching him and is kind of like, no, this is not the way this is spelled. And like, I don't know, hand gestures. I think I could see him as that kind of socially awkward intellect. Even if he is working with some very hokey dialogue. Conversely, I think he wasn't served too well in his kind of interactions with Ra. I mean, as he rolled up there, and again, it's not so much about the characterization or the acting, but just the story itself. I in my head, I just keep on hearing, "Let my people go," and I just couldn't. But what do you guys think of Spader?
I love Spader, but he's his best when he's playing a smug like asshole, and I just didn't. I just thought like with both him and Kurt Russell, they're kind of their acting superpowers are kind of muted here because they can't get to play on their strengths. Kurt Russell has no like charisma in this role, and James Spader just doesn't get to do what he does best. Anyone could have played like the character that he played in this movie. So yeah, I'm just surprised that Kurt Russell, you get such a charismatic action star as in a lead role, and you don't let him be charismatic because he's just basically stone faced and completely unemotive throughout most of the movie.
Well, I think the thing that nobody was really charismatic in this, and which is interesting because if in other Roland Emmerich movies, that character type is there. So I would say that Spader's very similar to Jeff Goldblum's character in Independence Day. I would say he's pretty close to Matthew Broderick's character in Godzilla. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of that revelation. And if you talk about like when Jeff Goldblum realizes that the aliens are using our satellites against us. That's like a big moment that had a lot of build up in the movie. He gets the information from his dad, who he has a relationship with, and there's this whole like thing about the dad losing his faith, and that comes later in the movie. With this one, they take them out of their world so fast and put them into this situation, and then they kind of don't really interact with each other as people for their personalities to come out. So like Spader's, he could have really had like all of those tropes are winning tropes, right? Like, being bumbling and kind of like, really into the work. Yeah, but you also need that environment and other people to play off of. He didn't have like anyone else who really knew the science enough to like bounce back any of those things. He had nothing that really drew him to like want to see this succeed, or the whole like science versus faith, or like just those things that'll kind of give him or anyone that just something to play off of and have like a dialogue part. Like if you said, those two actors are great, but I didn't have I can't remember a memorable exchange between anybody
Yeah,
almost,
they don't have character arcs. I mean, like they try to shoehorn one in for Kurt Russell at the end, but it's still like it doesn't make any sense
Mhm.
whatsoever. And that's a big problem when you have like two really amazing actors and you kind of waste them.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I think so. For me, again, I said my piece about Spader. For Kurt Russell, I do agree that I think his strengths are largely missed by this role. And I do see what they were trying to do by giving him the kid. He's got a kid who's just his own son that just recently died, and trying to tie that into him meeting the kids on the planet and creating the relationship with the one kid with the lighter and everything. But it just kind of falls flat for me. And it was kind of one of those things where I'm like, I see what you're doing. You're really trying to pull my heartstrings, but this is a blatant attempt, and it's kind of hackneyed. So I didn't really buy that. However, still, I feel like his presence was to kind of play that role of the muscle for the team, but also could possibly be the threat, right? Like, to some instance, you're not sure if he's going to blow up this bomb and kill all of the people on the planet. So he almost plays a hero that, to some degree, could also wind up being the villain in the story. And I think that's interesting. And I think he can play the muscle part well enough. I bought him as this soldier, but buying him as this soldier just means that you don't get to see him be very charismatic because the soldier's not supposed to be. So I mean, I bought him in the role. I just wish they found more ways to use him in
It,
more creative ways.
yeah,
No, but I think you
It's a
could have
shame.
done that in you
Mhm.
do that with a Michael Biehn in Aliens, right? Like Michael Bihn's kind of he's a little bit less suicidal and stuff like that, but there is the growing trust over time between him and Sigourney Weaver,
But you
and
need Ripley for that, and he didn't have a
exactly, and
counterpoint.
that's the issue with the movie, where he is going to be a cardboard cutout of a soldier
Yeah.
if you just don't give him anything else to
To work
do.
with.
And
And
Yeah.
even
yeah,
when it came to his backstory, that whole backstory was delivered through two soldiers who, after he goes, he's a
Says it.
mess, and then
Yeah.
the other guy's like, yeah, something about his kid dying.
yeah,
That's, come on, that to
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
complete backstory just relegated to two lines from extras
You don't
is
even see
yeah.
the
No,
extras say
and,
that.
and speaking of
You just hear it.
yeah, but
yeah.
speaking of aliens, you were missing an antagonist in this movie, and Kurt Russell could have been that antagonist, but he was very underwritten. But if you were not going to do that, you needed like a Paul Reiser, someone that
Mm.
was on that trip with ulterior motives, right? But there
Yeah.
was just no tension in the movie until the very end, where it's like, oh yeah, the bad guy's back, and he wants to blow up Earth.
Mm. Yeah, at no point did I think that Kurt Russell was gonna
Actually,
commit genocide.
yeah, fair enough.
But that could have
Oh,
been so, because I thought for a minute that's where we were gonna go, where Kurt Russell is this suicidal guy. He's on this planet now, and he realizes, look, I could take over this planet or something. I could gain control over it. And I thought it was going to be like a battle of wills
I can
between.
control these idiots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But that would be a natural thing, right, and almost relatable. Because I thought they
Heart of
were. See,
Darkness.
this is my problem with Roland Emmerich movies, is that they're not really about anything. They're not a metaphor for anything. They're just pure comic book entertainment.
But there's nothing wrong with that necessarily either,
There's
right?
nothing wrong with that, but I think just especially as you're older, you just wish there was something this is a metaphor for something, or there's a
Yeah.
message behind something.
You wanted a
And-
steak dinner and got potato chips.
because even with the Dune, I mean, I'm not a huge sci-fi fan, but at least with the recent Dune reboot, right? It was about something. It was about colonialism and all this kind of stuff. There's other themes there that make the story richer. Whereas this movie was just about a bunch of Marines that go to another planet and try to save the planet. But that was it. There was nothing. I didn't feel
He
like there
freed the
was any
slaves, y'all.
underlying-
He freed the slaves.
But that's not even really explored, right? And again, it's just it's there. It's very surface, and it's not. The surface is never scratched.
Well, and the thing is, it's when you're talking about the metaphor for for the food, the plate is still the same size, right? Like, this isn't an hour and a half movie where you can say, oh, they didn't have time to set up any of these things. They spend so much time doing other things. So, for example, where you're talking about the additional, if you're doing something with aliens, you have 6 other soldiers on screen. Give one of them something to do that'll add another dynamic. I
Yeah.
can't, like no one was memorable. Nobody had like a cool line. No one did anything. So they were just very placeholder. No,
Say hello to King Tut,
no, I'm
asshole.
saying anyone other than Spader. Like
What a rush.
It's okay. I stand corrected.
French Stewart.
No.
Come on, French Stewart.
It just felt like a
only because
movie
he was
that
French
had.
Stewart, yeah. But Dash, you're right, because I was thinking of Aliens, I was thinking of Predator, watching the Marines, and like none of them have like any funny lines or none of their you can't tell one character from another other than like French Stewart's voice. But it's just like completely just wait. They're just sitting around waiting for James Spader to come back or like asking Kurt Russell what to do. But they're not characters. And at least you could have had like well-written characters that kind of played off of each other. And even like The Thing, and you have a bunch of guys, but they all have very strong defined characters, even though they don't get a lot of screen time. So it could have been done, but it just wasn't.
And going from this is my the most recent Roland Emmerich movie for me. I did not expect to go on like a downward trajectory with him because I love Independence Day. I think it's a great summer blockbuster type movie. The very like what we're talking about, right, Carlos? It doesn't have to be King Lear. You could turn your brain off. It's a blockbuster, big action set pieces spread throughout. And it had a lot of characters who, like, I remember even the president's wife had like a little mini arc. Vivica Fox, the stripper who, rallies up the people. Even her, remember she had like the idiot friend who wanted to go see the aliens and dies.
Yeah.
Like this movie, that movie had so many people that I remembered. Even Jeff Goldblum's like coworker from the Burkett, like it felt like an ensemble type movie, but everyone had like a little piece that added to a thing that other people could play off of. And in this one, it's much more confined, which actually draws more attention to it. Like in Independence Day, they're so spread out that you generally don't see too many of them interact with each other at the same time because they're so not in the same place. This one, there's like 8 people traveling together, and they're like, we're not going to interact or do anything memorable together.
I think you mentioned Telly. You mentioned Jay Davidson earlier. You expressed how you felt. Dash, any thoughts on Jay Davidson as Ra?
I think that I was watching on the retrospective, really interesting. Wasn't impressed with the script, didn't want to act, and asked for an obscene amount of money,
$1 million,
and
right?
They were like, okay,
here,
and did it. So I think like that if a little bit felt like that performance, but I mean it's a tough sell. That not even speaking
he's an
a
Oscar
real
nominated.
Well, I mean, this was coming
actor.
off of Crying Game, which is what broke him, so this was one of those things. Yeah, you get an Oscar nomination, you get a big fat.
He's a fashion designer or something.
Yeah, something. But I mean, I think I understand. I kind of understand. Maybe they're going for this androgynous kind of thing. But like, what do you do with it? You still have to be threatening. You're the villain of the sci-fi movie, right? So, and there's nothing there. There seems to be no plan at all. Just that you've come into my plan now and I have to blow up yours. But there's, I mean, maybe I missed it. But is there like some kind of grand scheme or anything that?
No, there can be only one. He actually says, I think at one point,
all right,
there can only be one Ra.
And he doesn't speak English at all, which actually, it's like that. It's a ancient Egyptian, I guess, or
trying to
like
pretending.
So I think like all of the things that you would latch onto. There's no kind of like interaction with anyone on his side, right? Like a subordinate, like a like a Starscream, someone who's like.
Well, he does. He's got his guards, right?
Well, he does the thing where he kills one of his men for
the brain drain.
Which was kind of silly.
Like an actual.
That just looked so silly and funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant like more of an actual like okay, these people have like a dynamic, less than just to like make a point.
Explain why you have all those scantily clad boys like hanging around you. What was the point of that?
Yeah,
is that what the 10 seasons of the show is?
No, they don't.
Those mention boys come back. Are they?
No, they don't. They don't mention it.
That was very that was very weird.
Different on the show. All right, and also I think it's really interesting that this is the last movie he did. After this, he quit acting completely, so that says something.
Okay.
Quick shout outs to a couple of other people that are worth mentioning. Lily Avital, I think, was actually absolutely gorgeous. Didn't have much to work with, but she served her point as the love interest, and I think also the reason that the translation happened.
Mhm.
Alexis Cruz as Scara. Again, I think he was charming. Again, not much to work with, no lines particularly, but and they really tried to make that connection between him and Kurt Russell. I don't think it really
No,
worked. Leon Rippey as General Rest is always nice to see. He's one of those guys where you don't know who he is, but you recognize him from somewhere. John Deal as Kowalski, French Stewart.
recognize him.
Eric Avari as the leader. Manewe? Manewe? I kept saying that over and over for some reason all day today. Jimon Hansu. And again, I mentioned that the only the only member of the team that's black is the only member of the team that dies. Take for that what you will. Let's move on to the direction. Again, we were just kind of talking a little bit about Emmerich. This is the first movie he made after Unisol. Right before Independence Day, he'd go on to do things like Godzilla, The Patriot, Day After Tomorrow, 10,000 BC, White House Down, Moonfall. He also did a bunch of episodes to the series, the different franchises, which I think is really interesting.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Um,
I didn't know he was still connected to the series at all. Because I know there was like the rights were taken away from him and Dean Devlin. So
Yeah. No, yeah, but again, I guess cash cow. Everyone wants to get
Okay.
for the trough. So conversely to what Dash was saying, I actually think that this is a step up from Unisol, even if it's a definite step down from Independence Day. What do you guys like in the pantheon of the movies that we kind of mentioned? Where do you think this movie sits?
it's a step up, a step forward, and two steps back
How
compared
so?
to Universal Soldier. There's a little bit more production design here, but also it's like only limited to the pyramid, and everything else is looks like anything else you've seen in a movie. Um, yeah, there's just not a lot of I'm not a sci-fi fan, but when I go to see a sci-fi movie, I expect a lot of attention paid to the look of the movie, and that's just kind of missing here. And then I am not a fan of Independence Day, and this sort of like captured. I could see why he ended up doing Independence Day after this, and perhaps having a studio behind him, kind of keeping a closer eye on the script, is why Independence Day became as successful and well regarded as it was. But you kind of I see the same problems in Stargate as I saw in Universal Soldier, where it's like they're just unclear like what story they're trying to tell here, other than just kind of an adventure with no ending, um, and very just like very superficial characterizations, no real drama going on, and action is the big missing piece in Stargate, because nothing happens
Dash?
until there's no only that battle sequence at the end essentially, right? And then that siege and attack on the village, but that's about it. That's like two action scenes.
Yeah, and even the scene that you're talking about is very Batman Begins, right? Like they have the one where you don't see anyone,
Yeah.
so it's an action scene, but
In
first off,
name
why are
only.
they stealth? Yeah, because you're not seeing any of those things. I actually disagree a little bit, where I thought that Universal Soldier seemed better directed to me than this in terms of the scope. One thing that I had noticed about Roland Emmerich movies, they seem to want to feel big, like multiple locations, timelines, like lower thirds that are like 1920s previous whatever. But then what you're seeing, and this is I just feel like is the theme, that what they're trying to set up rarely matches the build up for it. So it's like, we're going across the universe and it's sand. I think this was probably a movie that the budget drove up because of the sand, but it didn't look like expensive, right? Like shooting in a
Yeah.
desert has to be incredibly hard in
Difficult, yeah.
terms of like with your equipment, like
Getting there, getting back.
yeah, like where are people being held, the sun,
Yeah.
like all of these things. But what it translates into is just 50 people on sand, right? Like that's not too visually spectacular. And the issue that I had, and this comes across with the direction, because it didn't need to be portrayed to that level. And I think when it borrows so heavily visual, so Roland Emmerich seems like someone who's like a big borrower, which I'm totally okay with. Like, you get inspiration from someone, and this is your version of, Ghost Dog was his version of the samurai movie. Quentin Tarantino does his version of Hong Kong action movies, or, Westerns, whatever. With Universal Soldier being like his James Cameron one, there was like very clear comparisons because they were so close. This one, I felt like the comparisons were so close to Indiana Jones and your Star Wars things in terms of like the music playing with them like looking off screen as if something is like going to be, that's the Spielberg shot, you know, like the sense of wonder. And then you see the point of view and it's like, ooh,
Yeah, it
desert.
looks like
You know,
looks like our planet. Yeah,
yeah. So
just shittier.
yeah, it just felt like I think like, you know, that was purely the direction of like, you didn't have to do that because you kind of shot yourself in the foot of like building up what you're, you know, when Steven Spielberg always had the payoff when you saw someone looking off camera, you knew like, you know, in War of the Worlds, when it spins around on Tom Cruise's face, you're gonna see some shit. This one, I thought that the choices didn't match.
Well, speaking of directors, I feel like this was also produced by Carolco, however you pronounce it, the same company that produced Universal Soldier, and I gotta, you know, which is post Terminator 2, and I gotta feel like that company thought they found their new James Cameron. And you know, like James Cameron, if he had directed Stargate, it would have been like mind blowing. And then Roland Emmerich, I don't know. He's just a very lucky guy that he ended up doing the Independence Day, and he found his niche. Because if you're looking at the Stargate poster, it's basically the Independence Day poster. You swap out the spaceship for a flying saucer and the pyramid for the White House.
But I think in Independence Day, he got the missing pieces of
but people. I wonder if that's the studio coming in and just having a team, because I read some of the trivia for Stargate, and it sounded like this was like independently produced and there wasn't a major studio behind it. And I wonder if I gotta imagine Independence Day was a result of tons of studio notes and tons of studio heads kind of keeping a close eye on everything.
Reining them in a little bit. Yeah, sometimes everybody needs it. All right, so let's move on. We're running a little long here. So just very quickly, Telly, could you give me some thoughts on how you felt about the SFX and like / production? You mentioned production design a little bit, but like SFX, production design, any action choreography, just a couple.
I think for its time, I remember seeing the trailers and being like blown away by some of the special effects for its time. Watching it now, it looks kind of dated. But you know, they keep it to a minimum. So, but the effect of the water coming out of the Stargate, and that was like beautiful, amazing.
Yeah. And I think it still holds up.
Was that the similar effect as in Time Cop when he goes through? Was there like a water thing?
Time Cop was just a little bit worse. You know, like same.
I wonder if had that. It must have been the same. It must be the same effects company. But
okay.
Yeah, but I think the effects were fine because there's not too many of them. You know, and for its time, I'm sure it was like pretty like really amazing to see. But yeah, they were serviceable. Can't say they were bad.
Yeah, no, I thought the effects were used, and that's part of the limited action, right? Like they don't use effects that much in the movie, and I thought but it was one step forward, two back, because you know they go into this really cool looking water effect going into the portal, and then it went into that like zooming through space, and I was like, all right, that was kind of whack, but like the ship flying above, which we'll see later in his work in Independence Day, I thought that was serviceable too. So nothing really bothered me from it. The issue that I had, I thought the production design felt just very low energy in terms of, you know, it's the promise of like a new world, but then it was just only delivering on what we've seen. They have rags, like they didn't have like any advanced like if you take something even like Alien, super subdued, but when you're like, yo, this is a full world, and it's just the implication of like, what does tech look like in the future, and this is Ridley Scott's spin on the interior of a ship and how they get around, like Ripley's suit and Aliens, like that's, you know, has a practical design, but you're like, oh shit, that's really interesting. They're just slaves, you know, like ours. There was nothing really. I thought that like kind of one location that he was in kind of looked cool, but it also felt just so empty that it like the wonder kind of wore off for me kind of quick. But the effects I thought were good.
So for me, the effects are again iconic because they took a lot of the special effects from the movie to use on the subsequent shows. So the water thing coming out the tunnel, right? That again is not just, that's like the first appearance of something that I watched for however many seasons of however many shows. I know that at the time it blew my mind because, you know, I think it's a kind of first time they're starting to use CG in that era. And so I was really impressed by it, and actually fairly impressed by how well it held up. I want to give a quick shout out to the unfolding and folding helmet that they had, right? Because again, in the context of the movie, when that happens, it's the first time that you see that there are humans inside those, that the guards for Ra are actually humans, because, kind of without that, it could just be these horse-headed dudes that are aliens, because you don't really know.
Right, but
So
but the heads don't really move. Like, because that
okay,
was a question of mine. Because when Ra has the mask on, and he addresses the slaves. Do they think that's what he is? Because it's like
yeah,
obviously a mask.
because mind you, when they kill one of the guards in front of the slaves, he has to take the mask off to show them, look, these guys are just humans. Right, so
Okay.
they think, so from the slaves' perspective,
Okay,
these aren't
dogmen.
humans; these
Okay.
are guys with horse heads or whatever.
All right.
But the reason
Yeah.
I bring it up is because it was the first time I had seen it. I thought it was really cool at the time, but when the time came for the television show to come out, they couldn't afford the budget to CG that every single time it happened for every other characters. So when and I remember when the show was about to come on, when there was rumors about it in Fangoria or whatever magazine we were reading, Starlight maybe.
Starlog.
My thought, even Starlight, my thought at the time was, how are they going to do that effect? And they can't afford. Let's see how it plays out. And in the very first scene of the very first episode of the show, somebody walks through the Stargate, and the alien, the guy who played Kratos, right? That dude does the mask, and they had to do it practically. So in the movie, the thing goes completely around and disappears into the, his outfit or whatever. But because they couldn't do it for the show, literally just has two levels. It like opens up, opens out a little bit, and then they're just talking with the mask kind of like flapped up, like it doesn't disappear. And it is the most disappointing, biggest letdown ever.
Yeah.
And every time it happens on the show, I'm like, no. So for shout out to that.
They should have did the Power Rangers where you spend the money to do it once, but
And then
then
they
just
run
use
it over
that.
and over.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't do that with every single character, right? Like, 'cause mind you, you have to see the person's face underneath. But yeah, it's disappointing. And then quickly, I just want to give a quick shout out to the music. Again, this is one of those things where I think the score was sufficiently epic. It was stuck in my head, and maybe not just specifically for the use in this movie, but in the larger context, because the TV show then went on to use the same themes. So I'm hearing the themes whenever you see the aliens, those like strings that almost sound like they're crying, like, wee, wee. The actual theme music, all of that stuff gets carried over into the TV show. So for me, it harkens back to my feelings for the show, maybe more than the movie. I don't know if you guys have any quick thoughts about the music.
No, I recognized the song right away because I did watch a lot of sci-fi. So I would hear like I'd seen the intro to Stargate a lot. So hearing that, I was like, oh shit, that's the joint.
Anything, Telly, or
No, just it was good.
so
It was
much.
a good score.
Serviceable?
Nothing memorable to me, but it served what was up on screen.
All right, so wrapping up, let's just talk a little bit about how the movie did and kind of talk about the reviews. The film Stargate was released on October 28th, and grossed about $196 million at the worldwide box office, with about 71 million coming domestically and another 125 from international audiences, all on a $55 million budget. It set the record for the highest grossing open weekend for an October release, which it held for 4 years. It opened at number 1. It stayed there for 2 weeks, then dropped to 3, then to 6, and by November it was kind of off the list. So a huge win financially, and that's just only for this movie. That's not considering all the money that they made with the franchise down the line. So this thing was huge for them, right? Review wise, it has a 53% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 7 out of 10 on IMDb. Roger Ebert hated this movie, saying in his review, the movie Ed Wood, about the worst director of all time, was made to prepare us for Stargate. Ebert awarded the film 1 out of 4 stars and said, even over 10 years later, Stargate remained on his list of most hated films of all time.
Most hated.
Sam Bam,
Okay.
Yes, he hated this movie. Sam Bam from Letterboxd gave it a half a star, writing, White man's wet dream. Half star only because of Kurt Russell. Abandoned this piece of shit. And then Luna also from Letterboxd also gave it half a star, saying colonialism, white exceptionalism, racism, and misogyny all in one shitty sci-fi movie wearing historical fiction disguise. What's not to love? This shit sucks so fucking bad. So we know where she stands. And on the other end of the spectrum, Rick D from Letterboxd gave it 5 stars, saying, this movie is a constant joy to watch for me. I love the concept of the Stargate allowing travel between worlds. Russell and Spader are excellent. The addiction-like world is a wonder. Excellent. I so love Vivica Linfors at the beginning of the movie. This movie is loaded with solid acting. French Stewart, Eric Avari, a young Jimon Honsu, and a young Carlos Lanchu, gorgeous Millie Avital, to name a few. EFX are solid and still holds up over the years. So, before we get to our rating, we just like to ask about favorite scenes. And because you guys dislike this film so much, I'm going to give you an opportunity to give me favorite or least favorite scenes. Telly, why don't you give us a start?
Oh, my God. I guess my favorite scene in terms of where I was the most engaged is when they enter the Stargate, because there was so much promise of something amazing on the other side, and the effects were great. But then, an hour later, we're waiting for something.
Least favorite, everything else.
No, I didn't hate the movie. But I just thought I was let down by it.
And the same with me. And that whole beginning, I didn't think it like worked, but I think it hit the beats that they need to get there. And same thing, like, it had the grounds shaking. They're gonna see, it activate. And again, like, I think that Roland Emmerich does a good job with building expectation. And I don't want to say a good job. I think he can build expectation, just because, like, I'm thinking that, right? But I'm also thinking, like, to get there, they like had 2 scenes of Spader's backstory that got him there, and that was like super just straight to the point, and didn't really have anything below the surface. Same thing with Kurt Russell, so I don't want to say like he built it up a lot, but I think the what's in the box kind of storytelling I thought worked. And the lab I thought did a better job than Time Cop. Remember Time Cop? It looked like just a warehouse, or like the basement somewhere. Like, I thought
the
that
tracking map thing. That's what it got you, right? That little thing that was like the map. No, Time Cop,
where it was just clearly like the basement
Someone's
of like
basement.
an apartment building.
Okay. Yeah.
With this one, I thought it was cool. Like, remember where they were talking about the gate, and then he was doing the presentation, and then they lower the shutters, and it turns out the gate's right there behind them. Yeah. I thought like some of that stuff was cool. So
and all that's in the show too.
Yeah, so that was my favorite as well.
One cool thing they actually do in the show too is, like, now it turns out like there's a bunch of gates everywhere. It's not just the one gate, and so they have to have a protection measure, because all of a sudden all these armies are fucking coming through the gate. So what they do is they created this like metal plate that slides down in front of the Stargate. So like if someone activates the gate,
store.
Yeah, you gotta pull it down, put the lock
on it.
There's graffiti on it.
But the funny thing too is they put it like right at the event horizon, so anything that hits that gets smashed into a million pieces. Like, just anybody who comes through with this gaze down is just going to be fucking vaporized. For me,
it's like, I assure you, we're open.
For me, the favorite scene in the movie is the same as Telly's. It's the activation of the Stargate, what's behind the Stargate, what's happening, and just in general, I'm a sucker for portal scenes in movies. Just something about the concept of, like, especially when it's like the whole liquid portal thing, you want to, like, you stick your finger in, and I just love that whenever I see it whenever I see it in a movie. So all right, so with that, I think we're at the point where we're gonna wrap it up and discuss our final review scores for the film. So Telly, why don't you start us off?
I give Stargate 1 impractical headpiece out of 5.
I thought you said you didn't hate the movie. That's a one. A one is I hate this movie.
To me, a 1 is like you were not entertained and you'll never watch this ever again.
So what do you give a movie you actually hate? Is that a 0?
No, just
What
what they
differentiates a
want.
one from?
I mean, it
All right,
doesn't
I'm
matter.
sorry.
It just
Anyway,
like it doesn't matter if you hate it or not. Even if you hate it, you might go back and watch like a scene from it. To me, like a one is just like you'll never pick up this movie again. Because
Hmm.
all right.
there's bad movies that you like that you'll revisit, like The Room or
Mm.
something, right? It's a bad movie, but from entertainment value, it's like a 3.
Dash.
I give this one Kurt Russell with a guile haircut out of 5.
Nice.
I went in expecting good things, and it just didn't
Didn't
deliver on
deliver.
anything.
Okay, so for me, I think that although I did not like this movie nearly as much as I initially did, I still think that rewatching it now after all these years, I didn't hate it, and I figured it as far as a brainless actioner for something that created the basis of something that I actually really do love. I'm giving this. I'm giving this 3 retracting Egyptian helmets out of 5. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's Stargate. I think that Telly is going to be choosing our next film for next week. So, Telly, what are we watching?
Yes, in honor of Tony Todd, I'm going to pick not Candyman, but one of my favorite Tony Todd movies, 1990's Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, wow. Okay. Excellent. I
Oh,
haven't seen
I
that
got a
since it like
story for the next episode
save it
about
for the pod,
yeah.
man. Save it for the pod. All right. So thank you, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, for sticking with us and listening to us opine about Stargate. Please like, comment, subscribe. We're really trying to interact with the community here. If you have any suggestions on anything that you'd like to watch us review, please put it in the chat. And from Shoot, Punch, Kick, I'm Carlos, Telly, and Dash. Sayonara.